Hi, it's Sandra from SandraD Imagery, and this Watch Me Edit is where I'm going to show you how I created this image that was inspired by a song. I was listening to music one day and the song Yellow by Coldplay came on, and I've loved that song for a while, and I thought, oh, why don't I create an image based around the words of that song? And that sometimes is where I get my inspiration from. It could be listening to a song, it could be something that's happened, or no idea and I just play. So what I'm going to do is show you the base image that I first started with, or the background that I chose, and how I built up this image, showing the different techniques and my thought process along the way. This is my base image. Would you believe it was weeds in an abandoned tennis court that I photographed? And what I've done to get it like this is I've softened the colours. I've actually replaced a sky, put a sky up there that is one of my textured skies, and I played with a little bit of colour grading to get that dreamy soft look. And this is a background texture overlay that's available in my shop, SandraD Imagery. And I will often use different backgrounds or landscapes as a base image for my composites. So let's dive in and have some fun and look at how I created the image called Yellow. So here's my first layer, or the base image. So now I choose, well, what is my element? Do I want to add in this? Do I want to add a house, a tree? And I thought, I'm going to have a look in my stock library and see what I've got. And I found the perfect element just to sit in these flowers. And I'll turn that layer on, and there's my element. It's quirky, it's fun, it's digital art, but I love the jacket and I love the umbrella, and the hair just adds a little bit of quirkiness to the image that I'm after. But when I look at the background and the element, there's a mismatch in the colour. The background's quite soft and dreamy, and my element that I've chosen is very contrasty and strong in the yellow colour, and you can see the yellows don't match. But this is where now I do some colour toning or colour matching to get that element to work in with the background. And one of the techniques that I'll use is the levels adjustment layer, and I find that the levels gives it a softer colour and it works for my colour eye. So I'm going to turn that layer on, and you'll see there's the levels. I've done it as a clipping mask. I'm going to click on that, and this is what I tend to do, and I've got my properties panel open. I will actually get my mid-tone slider and I'll move it either to the left or the right and see what I'm after. And so if I do that left, it lightens it up, and if I do it to the right, it darkens it. So I'm just going to get it back to where I've got it working. I'll turn that layer off and on, and you can see now it's softened that yellow. Now what I want to do is do another technique, and I've called it colour toning, and I'm going to turn that layer on, and you'll see now it ties the colour all together with the element and the background. Now this is on a free tutorial on my website, SandraD Imagery, and I show you that technique. So once I've got that main element, because this is my hero, this is what I want to be sitting in my background. Then I started to listen to the song, and one of the lines in the song mentioned lights. And so it got me thinking, and I thought, do I add stars? Do I add a moon? What do I do? I'm going to go into my stock library, and I've had these mason jars sitting in there just waiting to be used. And I'll turn that layer on, and there's the mason jars. It's digital art that when I looked at it, these little twinkles here reminded me of fireflies, and it was exactly what I wanted, and it gave the illusion of lights in the sky. So I was happy with that. Then one of the words that was mentioned in a line was stars, and so again I looked in my stock library and I put a little star just to sit under the umbrella, and it's just what I call a little hidden gem. It's not too dominant, but it just adds in the element from the song. Now I have all my elements working together. I don't want to add any more. I could, but for me I like simplicity. So now it's about working with color grading, textures, and getting it to the color that I wanted. Now I look at this and it's okay like this, but I wanted some depth of color, and this is how I get my depth of color in the techniques that I use. So my next layer that I'll turn on is a wallpaper. I photographed some wallpaper in an abandoned home, and I've used it as a texture overlay. Now I'll click on the texture and I'll just go back to normal, and you can see now there's that embossed pattern of that wallpaper. And I'll just undo it and get it back to where I wanted. Just multiply. You can see the opacity is 73%. If I change that up to 100%, you can see it's quite dark, and I don't want that, so I'll just drop it back down to the 73, roughly around about there. And so there's my first texture layer. Then what I've done is a hue and saturation. I'll turn that layer on and I'll come up to properties, and you can see that I've desaturated -20, and so that now strips a bit of the colour. So I've got what I call these soft tones coming through, but I've lost a lot of the yellow. But what I want to do now is add another texture overlay, and it's called Harvest Gold, and it's from one of my texture collections, and I've chosen this purely for the colour grading. I'm going to turn that layer on and off. So by putting this texture overlay, and let's have a look at the blend mode, colour burn, and 28%, it now brings further depth of colour into my image, and it's bringing that what I call goldy tones coming through. Let's turn that off and on. I'm happy with that colour now. So the next layer that I work on is a stamp visible layer, but I'm going to turn that off and on. And what I've done on this layer is I've applied Gaussian blue to soften. Let's have a look at it with the layer off. It's strong, it's contrasty. By adding some Gaussian blue, it softens it and it gives it that dreamy look. The technique for Gaussian blue is to go to Filter, go to Blue, then choose Gaussian. Now I will play with the radius. If I don't want much blur on it, I'll drop that down. If I want a lot more softer blur on it, I'll bump that up to the right, but I'm going to click on cancel, and that's how I've got that subtle softness coming through on that image, because it's quite strong, very contrasty. Let's turn that layer off again, and you can see there's a lot of detail in there, and to me it's looking quite harsh, and I wanted that bit of a dreamy look. Now I'm getting there and I'm starting to think I'm happy with that. But I'm going to do another hue and saturation just to dial that down a little bit. Now, if I just take that down just a little bit, you can see I'm just subtly dropping the colours or the contrast in there. There's the colour toning technique that I've used again, but this time I've done it as a global colouring. It's like a colour wash. I'll turn that layer on. And now you can see it's got some depth in colour. Totally different when I used the technique earlier in my workflow. Now I'm happy with this. There's a stamp visible layer. But I'm going to do one more levels just as a little bit of a finishing touch. I'll turn that layer on, and again what I've done is got my midtones, and I've worked the midtone slider to the left to lighten, and I'll just bring it back a little bit, and that just now gives it the lift, the lightness that I was after. But the layers that I was using in my workflow were for colour grading, the two textures. I did some colour toning technique, and that's how I get depth of colour coming through my images. And my last layer is what I call a stamp visible. And that's how I created yellow. It all started listening to a song. It gave me some inspiration, and I thought, I'm going to play. I know I had some fun creating yellow and listening to the song to give me the inspiration. I hope you had fun watching the video and that you picked up some tips and techniques and how I created this image. And it's all about having fun, seeing what you can create, what inspires you, what is a style that you're after. Thanks for watching. Welcome to SandraD Imagery Shop, and I'm going to show you the two textures that I used. The background comes from the background overlays, and I'll just click on that, and it's from the fine art textured overlays. The next texture that I used for colour grading was from the fine art textures collections, and it's from my pop of colour. And I'll click on that, and you can see that there's a number of colours in there, and I use them for colour grading. And I know when people look at them, they'll go lilac or like the pistachio colour, but they are fabulous textures to use to give you that different depth of colour without adding too much texture. Thanks for dropping by in the shop.